Good evening. It's very. I'm very glad to see you here and to have you like visitors of this exhibition and this laser talk. So at laser talk we do during and exhibition the artwork as a living system of Christa, Sommerer and Laurent Mignonneau that organized in collaboration by Imal, and it was already shown in ZKM Karlsruhe, and also it was shown Oke Center in Linz. And here you will be able to come back and to see this exhibition. It will be open till September. We will discuss now the intersection between biology, technology, and art, and the use of biological system and processes serves as metaphor for the complex relationship between human nature and digital world. Today, I would like to introduce to you, but you already who are here, you met already, artist Christa Sommerer and Laurent Mignonneau, pioneer of the interactive art and artificial life. Particularly, they use very interesting computer algorithm and interactive interfaces to create works that engage with the viewer in a new and unique ways. They have worked in this field since 1992, and their work has been exhibited in major museums and in galleries. And what is particularly interesting, because they use advanced technologies and scientific concepts to create thought-provoking artworks that challenge our relationship with the natural world and our understanding of life itself. Dr. Elio Tuci, a researcher in interdisciplinary domain of bio-inspired robotics and computational intelligence. And his research activity, he draws inspiration from nature to design control mechanism to allow artificial agents to operate in a complex environment and to learn from their experience in an autonomous way. He researches in the field of artificial life with a focus on using robotic and computational models to understand the behavior of biological system. And I would like to introduce you Florian Zanatta, who will be moderate this laser talk. He is conducting research projects on the Mosses, biogeography and urban ecology. During his PhD thesis in University of Liège, he developed a novel framework for dynamic ecological niche models, integrated species-specific and spatially explicit migration simulation in order to explore bryophytes' potential migration capacity through wind dispersal in the context of climate changing. In 2021, he co-founded a citizen urban ecology non-profit lab in Liège called La Cime, which develops science communication and citizen science-based research projects and activities. We will start our conference with a presentation by the participant of their work, and I would like to give the floor to Dr. Elio Tuci.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the introduction. It's really a pleasure for me to be here this evening with this artist. I'm not an artist myself, and what I've tried to do in this short talk is just to justify my presence here with some of my work that I've been doing with robots. So I've been doing research for about more than 20 years, and some of this work is with a little robot, and I will show you some of this work. But I will focus my talk on 3 points that you see here in the title: evolutionary algorithm, autonomy, and swarm behavior, because these 3 points, I think they create some connection, loose connection maybe between my work and the amazing, nice work that you have seen by Christa and Laurent. So I'm a professor at the University of Namur, and I would like to start actually from. Can you hear myself? Because I'm not very used to talk to a microphone, so I need to get used to it. I was saying I would like to start from, let's call it a metaphor, maybe a bit stretched, but I hope that you stay with me, where I compare a scientist that design a robot with the visitors that enter into a museum or an art installation. And obviously, I guess you agree with me that when the visitors is in front of the artistic work, it creates this kind of empathy. So like the glance, the look at the artistic work, it becomes immediately empathic, and the artistic work triggers emotion in the visitors, and the visitors attribute some meaning and emotion to the artistic work. The same things more or less happen, probably with less empathy, but happens in science when someone tries to design a control system for autonomous robots, in particular for autonomous robots that are required to operate in a natural and dynamic and unconstrained environment. So what the scientist does is just what I would do if I was the robot. So what kind of rule does the robot need to be able to cope with the challenges of the environment? So what the scientist does is try to put his head in the robot and try to develop some rule that then become the mechanisms that drives the behavior of the robot. And so you see this strong interaction between the designer that at some point become the robot itself to try to develop the solution to the problem of the robot. Now, in the case of the work of Christa and Laurent, this interaction, it becomes really immersive. The visitors has the possibility to interact with the artistic work and to give motion and dynamics to the artistic work. In my case, is actually the opposite. I try as much as possible to disappear, to reduce at minimum this process of becoming myself the robot, because I want to avoid to inject some bias into the robot. So I don't want the robot to solve the problem in the way in which I would solve it, but I want the robot to solve the problems in his own way. And the reason why I want to do this is because I want the robot to be autonomous. And my idea of autonomy, I guess you agree, is a system is autonomous when it's capable of developing its own rules. So like people in a country, they're autonomous if they can decide by themselves how to manage their social and political life. For the robot, it's the same. The robot will be truly autonomous when it will be able to develop its own way to interact with the environment. But in order to do this, the designer has to make a step back and let the robot to find his own way to solve the problem, which is actually very, very difficult. Now, the reason why you want to have the robot autonomous is because, from my point of view, only if you have truly autonomy, you can have intelligence. And it's also true that any autonomous system, so any system that can autonomously define its identity and making itself alive, is also intelligent. But the interesting point, so you see here, we start from a difference between what I do, which is to actually try to disappear as much as possible from the robot point of view, while they try to make the visitors as interactive as possible. So we start from two opposite processes, but the way in which we do it is very interesting with actually the same methods. And these are methods that we draw from nature. So in particular, natural evolution. So from natural evolution, we take the three basic ingredients of the evolutionary process, so the genetic inheritance, the variability, and the selection, to generate in my case, to generate the control system that drives the behavior of the robot, whereas in Christa and Laurent, you have seen I think in the pool, the creatures are controlled by a kind of evolutionary algorithm. So evolutionary algorithm is a family of algorithms which is inspired by the mechanism of evolution you see here with the 3 ingredients. And this is a kind of flow chart that describe what's happening in an evolutionary process. So in evolutionary process, I describe it in the context of my work, which is the design of a control system. We generate a population of solution, which is just a string of numbers. Each string of numbers, actually, we call it a genotype, and each number in the string we call it actually gene. And then each string is a kind of solution. Then we transform with the coding the solution into a control system. Then we evaluate the control system, and then once all the solutions have been evaluated, we rank them, we select them, the best, and then we keep on evolving, we keep on running the algorithm, the mechanism, until we are satisfied with the solution. The advantage of this process is that what the designer does is mainly 2 things. It defines the ingredient of the evolution, so the building blocks with which the evolution creates the solution, with which, let's say, the evolutionary algorithm create the solution, and then we define the fitness function. The fitness function is just a formalism that scores the behavior of the robot. And the fitness function can be very, very general. So I can have a very, very complex task for a robot, and I can simply say, you have done very well, or you have not done very well. Or I can be a bit more specific, saying how much good the solution was. But I never say how the robot should solve a problem. It's the evolution that finds the solution, and myself, I just drive the evolution towards a certain direction with this fitness function. And in my case, now I don't want to enter into much detail to annoy you with this detail, but when I was saying that I code so the solution has this this string of numbers, and then this string of numbers are coded into a control system. The control system is, in large majority of the cases, an artificial neural network. Maybe nowadays you have been all familiar with the ChatGPT. ChatGPT, for example, is based on a huge neural network. I'm using a very small neural network. Neural network can be just represented as a direct graph, so with nodes and connection between nodes. And there are some parameters that need to be found, and the evolutionary algorithm help us to find the best combination of parameters that drives optimally the behavior of the robot. Now, what I would like to do is to show you some of the work I have done with this approach. Like here, for example, you see this robotic hand, which is a hand which is required to make a distinction between a sphere and an ellipsoid object that are very, very similar. And the hand is only equipped with 10 binary sensors. So there are 10 binary sensors distributed around the surface of the hand, the palm of the hand, and every perceptual state is by itself ambiguous. So the hand cannot distinguish between the sphere and the ball just by one touch, but it has to interact with the object to make the decision. And the way in which the hand interacts with the object is actually developed by the evolutionary algorithm. In this case, you see the Pioneer robot that is visually driven. So there is a camera, and the camera points in front of the robot, and the robot has to drive on the red path, then will be a green path. Now, when we did this work, it was very challenging to interface the camera with the neural network, because the camera is a very huge, it creates a very huge input space. So what we have done, we have reduced the camera to a 5x5 grid. So actually what the robot sees is actually something like this. And this is enough for the robot to remain, so this kind of coarse, very, very coarse visual system, it's enough to remain on the path. And actually, the amazing thing is that the system is even adaptive, in the sense that if you see here, he managed to remain in the path regardless of the color of the path on the non-path area. which was actually the objective. The objective was to create something that would work for any possible combination of the color of the road and the color of the non-road area. Now, most of my work that I've done with this kind of approach, evolutionary algorithm, neural network, refer to a research area which is called swarm robotics. That you have seen an instance of swarm behavior in the artistic work with the bees, but also the flyers that moves in the. Here we are referring to a robotic system. But the principle is basically the same. So these are robotic systems that are inspired by the behavior of social insects like bees, ants. And the idea is to have a group of robots. Each robot has its own control system. Perception is only local, so there is no, for example, say, God view perspective that gives the robot the information of what's happening everywhere in the environment, but the robot can only locally sense the environment around his body. And communication is stigmergic. So I don't know if you're familiar with this word. Maybe the biologists can help me. But stigmergic communication is communication through modification of the environment. So like I move an object, and then the agent that comes after me see that the object has been moved, and then they react in a different way to the fact that this object has been moved. This is, for example, the principle that the termites used to build this huge nest. Now, the challenge in swarm robotics is to move from local rule of behavior to the global response. So what we are interested in swarm robotics is the collective behavior. So the robots are supposed to cooperate as to do something nice as a collective. But the designer can only work at the individual level. So we can only define the behavior of the individual robots and the rule of interaction between the robots. And through the interaction, the robot should generate as an emerging process, the global response. And here you see two instances of relatively simple collective behavior. Like, for example, this is a kind of, we call it self-assembly. You see three robots. These robots, they have a gripper, and they have to attach to each other. And you see that before attaching, they do this kind of dance. Now, this dance is needed to decide who will make the action of gripping and who will receive the connection. So the role, basically in this context, the role are not assigned by hand by me. The system is completely homogeneous in the sense that all the robots are the same, and they have to negotiate between themselves who does what. And this who does what, it happens through this kind of dance at the beginning that basically breaks the symmetry and help the robot to autonomously allocate roles. In this other case, you see 4 robots that are required to push this object. I mean, this object is particularly heavy, and that requires all the 4 robots to push the object for the object to be transported. This robot, they cannot communicate, they can only see the object, but they interact basically in a very, very simple way with a mechanism based on an optic floor sensor. So the optic floor sensor is like a mouse. I guess here everybody's familiar with the mouse that we use for our computer. So this is an optic floor sensor. We mount the optic floor sensor on the bottom of the robot. And what is the point of the optic floor sensor? Well, imagine a robot that touch the object and try to push the object. If all the other robots are pushing on the opposite direction, the robot tries to move forward, but is actually moving backwards because the other robots, they push the object in the other direction. Whereas if the robots push the object and there are other robots that push the object in the same direction, the robot will actually move forward. Now, the optic floor sensor, it only helps the robot to distinguish between these two conditions. When it pushes the object and indeed makes a forward movement from the condition in which you push the object, but it makes a backward movement. And this is enough, is enough feedback rich enough for the whole robot to coordinate, and as you see here, to find a common direction of movement and to push the object in the same direction. I don't know how I'm doing with time.
About now your project, new one.
Okay, so not this one. the...
Yeah, next.
Okay. So,
Yes.
that movie that I skipped, you find out on YouTube of the Mignonneau. So this one, just to finish some advertisement. So I've just been awarded a European project which is called BABOTS. BABOTS is the acronym for Biological Animal Robots, and what we are trying to do here is to transform biological worms, C. elegans, we call it in robot, because through genetic modification we can reconfigure the brain, so the structure and the functionality of the brain, in order to change the behavior of this worm. And these particular strains of C. elegans that we are using in the lab, they don't have any collective behavior. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to engineer into this worm some form of collective behavior, and what we are trying to do to get this worm to do something together for us, and we will test this technology in a vertical farming environment. Okay, so I think I'm running out of time. I would like to, so if you have any question, I'm happy to tell you more about this project, which is a European project with several partners. And I would like to conclude by showing here the web page of my lab, and these are all my PhD students and my postdoc, which are actually the people that are doing the work. And thank you very much for your attention. Thanks again for inviting me here tonight.
Thank you very much, Elio. Now we give the floor to Christa and Laurent. So, you have seen now already his exhibition. They made a guided tour, and who is following us on stream, so just they can look, well, pictures, but there is a lot of material also in the internet. And now we have this fantastic opportunity to listen their presentation, and after you will be able to also ask them questions about work.
So thank you so much, Dr. Tuci. It was really nice to see, and we did already a small talk before, so we already found quite a lot of commonalities and also common interest, especially when it comes to genetic algorithms and also swarming behavior or the modeling of natural phenomena. Also, of course, like you said, we are coming more from the artistic approach and not so much from the scientific approach. Maybe coming, since many of you have been already downstairs in the short demonstration that we gave, maybe I could talk a little bit while Laurent is setting this up about the evolve that some of you have tried. And maybe you remember we have been drawing, or we showed you how to draw something on the touch panel. And then this drawing actually is a bit like what you explained, a genetic code that becomes the genetic code of the creature. And this creature's behavior, it's very green. The creature's genetic code is actually determined by the drawing, and it's like a string that can be propagated to the next generation. And I don't know why it's so green. But the idea is basically that we often use drawings or also other input data that are coming from the visitors, and use this as a genetic code, or like in the case of the typewriter that you showed, the text was used as a genetic code, which then can later be transformed and propagated to the next generation. So we have been using this idea of, it's very green, okay. Does this have to do, maybe if you don't do the mirror mode? Very strange. I mean, it fits to us green, but it's maybe a little strange to have everything in this green color. And Anyway, I can talk about the works, maybe it's easier. So genetic algorithms for us is insofar quite interesting is because we can use them in order to make evolutionary or simulate evolutionary systems and variability. I think you mentioned it in your talk, that this idea of genetic inheritance and evolutionary algorithms is a way to generate something that was not there before and let the system actually give you solutions and propositions. So, for example, if I briefly explain evolve, you draw a shape, then this shape is the genetic code for the creature. It determines how it looks, it determines the colors and the shape, and it also determines the behavior. So if you make a very good design under apostrophe, then this creature can become very fast and eventually it becomes very aggressive, because the faster it is, the more it moves around and the higher its chances to kill other creatures and eat up the energy of the other creatures. And if this creature then succeeds to eat up the energy of the enemy or of the prey, then this energy is added to its own energy level, and then it could have enough energy to mate and look for a mate. But we don't know where it finds the next mate. It really totally depends on who is around and what other creatures are there. And if there's no other creatures there, of course, its lifetime will be used up after a while and it will die. So I can show you. Thanks, Laurent, for fixing this so quickly. So this field of artificial life is insofar for us interesting because it helps us to make these open-ended and recombinatory artworks by linking the user interaction to the image production. And by applying these genetic algorithms and genetic programming, we can look for some form of emergence. I think this is also what we have seen, this emergence behavior between the three little robots. To us humans, it looks like they're very intelligent because somehow they have organized themselves suddenly to, connect to each other or to push this little, like you showed us really nicely, this little stick forward. And this is an emergent behavior that is happening by itself without that you programmed it. And this is exactly what we are also interested in, this emergent behavior that comes from the system itself and also from the interaction. So a design that is not predetermined and not pre-designed by us, but emerges through the interaction. Here we see, this was a long time ago at the Van Gogh Museum, where we see some children interacting with these creatures. And so the creatures swim, they mate, they evolve, they interact between each other, but also with the visitors. And this leads to these very unpredictable designs and unpredictable behaviors. So as I said, the drawing is actually the genetic code. And if you imagine, or if you can we cut basically all these parameters here, x, y, and z. All these parameters are then, I show you here, actually this is our genetic code of one creature. This is one creature's genetic code. This is the genetic code of the other creatures. Then when they mate, we just swap over some parts of their genetic code, basically mix them up in a way like you would be mixing it. Then this is the offspring. Then we add a bit of random. Random is also important. So we have crossover. We add a mutation by, for example, inversion and deletion. And then you get the child creature that looks a bit similar to the parents, but has also new features as well. And this is important, All of you are the products of your parents' genetic code and also your grandparents and the other ancestors before. So everybody of us is individual and very specific through this genetic, evolution. And this is super exciting if you use this for programming, for artistic works. And so what we can do with even very simple interactions, we can get very complex interactions and evolutionary structures, open-ended evolutionary structures with some form of emergent behaviors. Here also we added this idea of that you can also interfere with the system by, for example, touching the creature in the water and stop it from doing what it wanted to do. Because we also noticed this is interesting to not just have, the system evolve by itself, but also give the chance of interfering and add even more random and even more parameters to it. And the other work that we did not really talk so much about it, but it was just next to it, maybe you want to try it later, It's a lamp that you can use where you can feed artificial insects that are on the screen. And if you feed them with light, they come to the light, they catch enough light, then they have energy, and they could then also make children insects. And the children, again, are the mix between the parents' code, and they also fly specifically depending on their behavior, on their look. So if an insect has a very heavy body and small wings, they may be very clumsy and they can't go forward fast. But if they're very large wings and a slim body, maybe they are very elegantly flying quicker. So it also depends on how they move, depending on their look. This was a little, I don't know if you see it. Oh, it's too dark. But you just see here that the lamp is helping to make the insects come and then fly to the light. And if you are kind of delicately trying to conduct the light, you might eventually have more and more insects coming because you increase the chance that they meet and create children insects. And maybe the last work I want to show you, because we don't have so much time, is what Laurent demonstrated downstairs, is the typewriter, where the text that you type is a genetic code. So it's really directly the letters, the combination of the letters like AAA or BBB is the genetic code. And when then two creatures meet, they mix up the genetic code. So if you have AAA mixed with BBB, maybe the child is ABA or ABB or BBA or BBA. So there's lots of combinations possible. And maybe there's even a C inside, because we also add a random to it. And this is why it also looks so lifelike and so kind of almost like a living system. And I don't know, Laurent, if I should talk about this one. This is the portrait work that we showed downstairs. Here we don't use genetic algorithms. Laurent actually made a very simple rule. Maybe you want to explain this very simple rule, how it works for the...
Yes, hello. The portrait on the fly, you have maybe been making your portrait downstairs with it. There are about 15,000 flies on the screen, and they walk randomly actually on the screen, but they walk also on the video stream of the camera, and therefore they see the pixel value that they walk onto. And if the pixel value that they walk from the previous pixel to the new one is very different than the previous one, then they stop. And by this single rule, you can start to see the edges. So basically, it draws your face, the clothes, the silhouette that you perceive then through the screen. And all these flies are just gathering on this line, and that's how it makes the portrait. So it's a very, very simple and effective way how to actually make the portrait very quickly through this swarming of these flies. But it's not intelligent in the sense that they will try to make a drawing. They just happen to be at the right place at the right moment, and then you recompose with your vision actually the missing parts or the missing bits that they didn't complete. So that's a kind of an exchange between your perception and what the flies are doing.
And maybe as a very last video, we can show you maybe this one. Maybe as a very last video, we saw here also this was shown at the Leopold Museum in Vienna on a very large facade. We covered the whole museum with projection, very nice projections, and lots of ants were crawling around on the museum, which looked a little creepy, but each ant was about this size. And also this ant, like what you talked before, they were not intelligent as such, but by following each other and climbing on the detecting, say, for example, where the windows are or where the edges are, suddenly they made patterns. And we could sort of, have those ants create shapes and forms that would be not predictable, and they even would write some letters. Maybe you could talk briefly about how you made this with the text, how they were writing text. Mm-hmm.
So here the algorithm is much more complicated, because it's each ant has to decide where it goes. So it's not like the flies at all. The flies are randomly going. These ones, they decide, and they actually perceive their environment. So they see where the edges are on the video, and they can actually decide to follow that path or follow another one. By doing this, they reinforce the other ends to follow. So this is more, you can make portraits out of it, and it's similar, but they're actually making lines and follow the lines of your portrait. And if you move, they reconfigure and then find again where the edges are. So this is a different algorithm, but it produces something that is also extremely dynamic and very effective in the sense that they will do just a tiny movement to just recompose the picture, the next picture. If it's any picture, actually, you can try it.
Maybe let's stop here because I think we don't have so much time and we should leave some time for discussion.
So, first, thank you once again very much for your amazing work and presentation of tonight. And so I have different questions that are addressed for the whole of you three, and some particular for each. I don't know if Alexandra, you want to ask your question first, or I start myself. Okay. I have one that is more general, so that's maybe something that you can ask all of you from your point of view. That appeared to me when you were presenting, actually, and first with the presentation of Dr. Tuci, about when you were showing that for the camera, for example, the robots that was following the line, you shown that in the end even the camera itself was giving too much information for the aim of what you were wanting the robots to do. So you had to decrease the simplifying, so to say, the approach, so that you would be able to have the robots actually behave and have this intelligent behavior arising. And so that's a two side approach to it, is that you have to decrease the resolution, so you have to simplify, and at the same time it shows that in some senses, when we have an idea of artificial intelligence or intelligent behavior that you want to bring to some robotics or to some artwork, also we have an idea of, from our human point of view, that we have to have complex networks, frameworks, etc. And in the end, and that's the other side with the artwork that Christa and Laurent showed also. For example, even if when we look at the ants, it's more complex because of the dynamics and so on. It's a different approach. But when we see with the flies, that the discussion before we had was like, okay, there is something that is an intelligent behavior, but in the end, the dynamic and the coding was quite simple. So what would you say that this shows in some senses, that you have to simplify and then with simple coding or simple logics, you can end up with a complex or with intelligence, with intelligent behavior, either in robotics or in interactive artwork. What does it say?
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I mean, one of the first lesson from biorobotics is that we should not put too much into the head of the robots, because the robot can help itself through the interaction with the environment. It can exploit some structure that we don't perceive, because we don't look at the environment through the sensor of the robot. But the robot can find environmental structure that can definitely help itself to develop complex behavior. Now, in this case, in the case of the dimension of the robot that is visually driven, the resolution was very, very poor from a visual point of view, and this was because of a methodological problem. So it was not something that we we were aiming for. So this was something that we were forced to do it because we could not interface all the pixel of the camera with the input of the neural network. And nowadays, this one would have been possible because nowadays we have convolutional neural networks that do an amazing job. At that time, we didn't have convolutional neural network, and so we went through this incredible reduction of the input space, which produces very, very coarse perception. But amazingly, we found out that even that very poor visual system was enough for the robot to remain on the path, because it was really using the very, very pure contrast between the different pixels, and this was enough to stay on the road. If you want to add something about your artwork.
You want to say something?
Well, the flies, before doing the flies were done in, this portrait on the flies was done in 2015. And before that, we have been doing a lot of different artworks with a lot of programming and a lot of algorithm and a lot of parameters tweaking, which was heavy work. And with the flies, actually, I wanted to play a little bit around. And my question was, can we distinguish something very, very, very complex to something really, really, really random? Because at the end, sometimes it's really similar. It's very difficult to, if it's really, really complex, it's hard to find out what drives every element. Look at an ant nest. When you look at an ant nest, you don't know what the ants are all doing individually, because you have to follow every ant, and they all have their behavior. They don't have a boss around. They do things by themselves, and they reorganize themselves. It's a lot of computation. Even your brain is overwhelmed directly. Yeah? It's a lot. It's too many elements, basically. And this is maybe our fear of insects, actually, that we can't control if there are too many. It's really a fear, because then you don't know what's going to happen. It's this amount of information that then, if you look at something completely random, you try to find patterns most of the time to see if there is a logic in it. And sometimes you see something in a random pattern that is false. It's actually just an illusion. You try to make sense of data that have no relationship between each other. And then the gap is very, very little sometimes. It's very difficult to perceive the difference between an event that is really completely random, or something that has really a logic. And so this was a play. And I found out that, well, one rule was actually doing a very good job, because we are intelligent by ourselves, and we can make sense of very, very little information on the screen. So just a few pixels, and then you see your face, basically. But it's because you actually perceive this as an information, and it's enough to reconstruct all that thing. So this is an interplay between your perception and what the system is doing. And if there's just a little bit of information, just enough, just maybe a few rules, that's sometimes just effective. And we see that also happening within the organisms themselves. It's not extremely sophisticated sometimes. It's just very small mechanisms that actually just added to each other makes the things possible. And it is driven very, really well. And we see this with the system you also did, is that we don't need an extremely complex information processing. Sometimes very, very little things are just as efficient.
Thank you. So that was one of the question. Also, I think there is something that is connected to a question that you had, or I think Alexandra, to me, it was interesting because of the actual context of around the AI revolution that is going on right now in the public at the public level. I mean, with the ChatGPT and all this devices and dynamic that really like spread right now, and we have an experience that is more related to the social, to the social integration of these new technologies and the cultural revolution that it brings, rather than the technology itself of of a next step in the AI development. But I think the both of your answers were, to me, kind of giving a window of reflection for this, because there was something that for me is relating to our experience of technology and how we relate to it. And right now we have like bigger questions of around AI. It starts to be a huge matter at society level. Questions of should we stop at some point or keep on developing freely and so on. And I think there is a fear that is rooted into a misconception or a misunderstanding of what is the aim of an AI and how it is working, and that people are fearing like a kind of Hollywood movie fear of AI revolutionizing the whole society and being a direct threat to the society, the stability of society, and so on, because we are thinking of them as very complex and already autonomous dynamics. And you show with your the two different perspectives, artistic in bridging between art and sciences, that finally the dynamics itself is not so much about something very complex, and it's logical. To me, it's kind of a pedagogical approach to, or at least there is a consequences of this, either with your interactive art installations or with your approaches, Dr. Tuci, about how we could like create this swarm of robots, and how we could create something that have an intelligent behavior, or something that is close to some natural behavior. So one link question that I had to this before more general question was that this also something that you touch with your own approaches is this emergent behaviors that you want to reach, or that's one of the objective, or something that rise out of what you created. So you create a framework, you create a whole either an art interactive art devices, artwork, or a framework for robotic integration of dynamics. And what you want to bet on is this emergent behavior to be able to help us understanding things. What is really what you expect from this emergent behavior to teach us about either our own level as a species or human experience?
Actually, before responding, I have a question for Laurent. You show us in the last artistic work with the flyers that write letters, which, if I understood correctly, their movement, their behavior is reinforced by kind of mechanisms similar to the pheromone trails, or
it's inspired by that.
Is inspired?
Fully implemented, but it is inspired by it.
Okay, and yeah, so basically the hands, they don't have they are not assigned any position, so everything is emergent in the sense that
They're not assigned positions.
the letter emerge from the hands, that they kind of reinforce their trajectory.
Yes, but they still detect the lines where these contour lines are. So they still are given this kind of information, and then they decide where to go and to reinforce the trail when they are actually passing through. So they attract more of these ants. So it's reinforcing, and that's why you have a more clearer image when they actually do a drawing, because they all go to the lines, rather than the flies still move around randomly, and some of them are just doing the lines. No, that's the difference, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, it was very, very nice work, actually.
Oh, thank you.
And yeah, I mean, what do we expect from emergent behavior? I don't know. I mean, a friend of mine a few years ago wrote a paper engineering with the title "Engineering Self-Organization," which is a kind of contradiction because the self-organization emergent phenomena, I don't think is something that you can really engineer. Now, here in the audience, there is a mathematician expert, my colleague Timoteo, expert in emergent behavior, that maybe can later tell us more about this. Yeah, so it's what we do, in a sense, it contradicts itself, because we are kind of relying on self-organization processes, on emergent phenomena, without really being able to formally define the principles that generate a specific results. So we don't have the recipe to get to the final behavior, to the collective behavior, but we just mostly, to trial and error, work at the individual level, at the interaction between the units, hoping to find the right combination of elements that generate the desired solution.
On an artistic level, what we find interesting is when you are observing phenomena in nature and then you are recreating some of this on the computer and you show it to people, and then often we get this reaction that they feel like, wow, this looks so lifelike, or it reminds me to, I don't know, something in real life. So I think we somehow as humans have this affinity to anything that is living or growing or developing. I think there's a sort of general love of looking at things in nature, or swarming birds or swarming insects. So I think most people are fascinated by this, and they in a way like to see it or like to be out in nature and observe this phenomena.
Thanks. Definitely.
Poetic.
There's a poetic output, what we've seen today.
Poetic.
Okay? Which is the artistic part of the work. So I just wonder if you, obviously you have it before you start the work, and what is your reaction about the translation? What's your reaction in translating your input in poetic intention, or whatever artistic intention is, and the result that you see? There is also a poetic dimension to the result. Is it what you expected, and can you influence it?
I think that's a difficult question, because I mean, poetic is very
artistic, poetic.
Artistic, yeah. I think it's very.
There's always an intention. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And
for example, I mean, going back to the pool example, many people ask us, why do you make the pool and why do you put the water inside? Could you not just show it on the screen? And of course, we could just show it on a normal PC screen. But by putting it like horizontal, putting it with water inside, having this kind of inscenation, we want to emphasize this idea of the pool as a pool of life, or, you know, something that maybe reminds you to some form of ancient area of...
Was that in the intention?
Of course, yes.
Okay,
we are artists.
So you have the intention, you put
yes.
it.
Yes, of course.
And if you're not happy with the result because of the engineering, can you correct it?
Yeah, I mean, for example, the very first time we showed it in 1994 at Ars Electronica, I remember we could only have maximum 8 creatures at the same time, or 6 more? 20, okay, 20. But, you know, we were dreaming of having more creatures inside, because it's more interesting if more creatures are there, because then it becomes more and more complex. And for visitors, it's also interesting to see what's going on and try to follow what these creatures are doing. So, of course, we have always been dreaming of having more creatures in the pool. And now we have more creatures because the computers are much faster. But we also noticed that people who interact with this, they need time to understand what's going on. So it's very seldom that actually more than 20 creatures are in the pool. So sometimes the more technological solution you have doesn't mean that the work becomes better. So it's always a balance between what is available and what can you handle, and sometimes it's good to have limits too, and deal with the limits in a creative, artistic way. I'm not sure if that answers exactly your...
No, it doesn't matter. This is a good answer too.
Or in the case of the plant growing installation there, for example, it's important that the room is very dark, it looks a little bit
Yes, but
mysterious.
it looks beautiful, but I was just wondering if you can, at the end, come back because you're not happy with the result and correct it to be pleasing to your intention. Or you're as baffled by what you see when you work.
Yeah, we are often surprised and puzzled because each time people behave very differently. In every exhibition it's totally different, even though we know that generally how people will react. But for every situation and every exhibition it's different. I remember we had it at ZKM and that was installed a bit differently, so people react very differently in every country and in every situation, which is exactly why we love it, because it's,
It baffles
so
you.
unique.
Yeah, well, okay, that's the-
And here is great at Imal.
Is it still? Yeah, okay. So I have another question that I kind of already, well, you kind of already answered a little bit on this path. So I will ask it now. But so it's a more general question, and it's more oriented for you, Christa and Laurent. But I think Dr. Tuci will also something related to that. So it's a more general question, but I would like to see or to know. Sorry, how do you see the aim of your work that is bridging between technology, so to say, the virtual world, the human-made world, and the natural world in relation to our sensitivity as a species and our feelings about our place in nature. So more in general, my two ideas when I was watching your before experiencing it live today, but looking a bit of around what you have done as artwork along the years, I was asking myself if you whether see that interactive artwork as a sort of magnifier for a potential interaction with nature, some kind of extrapolation or building on this experience that you can have, or whether a way of extrapolate or express artistically through technology inspired by nature. So to say, if it's more like a magnifier or an extrapolation artistically inspired by nature. So it's more or less to.
Hello. Okay, so this one. Well, our attitude as an artist, we're both artists, we have a whole background in art. It's not so different than a painter making pictures of nature, except that we are more interested in the process that made the tree more than just representing the tree from the outside. So that's probably the aim, is to look at why things have a shape and how they develop this shape, rather than just drawing the shape. No, that's the attitude, and for this we have to understand, of course, the process by which this nature is of course not just predetermined. It actually has been evolving. It has been changing and is still changing. It's not just a process that ends, and so therefore it's adapting, changing, finding new forms, finding new ways. Some things will disappear, something will reappear, and therefore it's a very interesting thing because it's based on creation. It's really creating, and it's really interesting as artists to see how creation works and not just reproducing something with the shape. And that's a very complex question, because it's like, what is life? How does it work? All these questions have very deep roots, and we don't understand all the processes. We just observe still, trying to extract the principles, trying to see what's this interaction between all these natural elements that have a different behavior, different reason to be, And therefore, we need science. We need science because it's based on this observation and extraction of information. And this is very interesting to see that evolutionary process can be implemented in a computer. And a computer is a very, very poor environment compared to the world. There's really little computation to work. It's enormous on Earth what's happening, and you can't really do that on the computer. But you can extract this in principle and re-implement it with code, which is amazing because it's a much poorer environment, but you can reproduce this process of evolutionary system in a poor environment. So it's still possible to actually find out, a specific shape has a reason to be suddenly in this poor environment, but it is very logical, and it has a history, it has interaction, and then it leads to somewhere. And this somewhere, it's not random. It's actually has all this interaction from behind. It can be taken from outside influences. Like we put the public within the systems to reinforce this randomness, but also this arbitrary selection. So we are actually interacting with a system that could lead to a certain end, but with your interaction, suddenly it changes. And the path is changed, but it's still logical. And that's the interesting thing with the evolutionary system, is that it creates something that makes sense in this environment. And that's what we like very much.
I forgot the question. So it was about this interaction with nature. I mean, obviously, from a scientific point of view, what we try to do, we try to mimic nature to engineer more efficient solution. But on the same way, we try to understand more about nature by engineering the solution. Obviously, you will never be able to enter into the head of a ant of a bees. So in order to find out what kind of mechanisms, for example, bees use to make collective decision, you can only test it either mathematically or by developing simulation model or with robots. Like, for example, give you an example. A few years ago, a British biologist found out that when bees swarm to find a place where to build a nest, and then they come back. So you imagine these bees, they scout, they go around, they explore the environment, and then they come back. And then within the nest, the swarm, they have to make a decision. Now, when they make this decision, only 5% of the swarm knows the potential solution to the problem, or the potential destination, and none of the bees knows all the solution. So obviously, you imagine it's very hard to choose the best one when you don't know all the options. But the bees, he managed to optimize the decision, which process which is called collective decision making. And what we do in for example, in swarm robotics, we try to use robots to mimic this collective decision, and we test possible individual opinion selection rule to see which one generate the best decision, both in terms of quality of the solution, in terms of speed of the decision, etc. So there is this kind of common, there is biology for engineering and engineering for biology. I don't know if this was the...
Thank you very much. I would like to ask, maybe somebody in the auditorium have questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a question about the artworks that we saw downstairs about the evolutionary algorithm. And my question is, do these algorithms have a memory, like an history, or are we seeing the same artwork like the original visitor of the first exhibition? So I don't know, for example, if I have to do an example on the writing machine, does that algorithm know that certain types of combination of genes allow a better result in evolutionary terms, and the system tend to tend to make reproduce those kind of strings of genes, or is it just
then maybe it works, yeah. I tried to explain this maybe for this artwork. Okay, so I designed the system through functions, and it goes a little bit technical. Okay, so in the computer, you can make random, but it's called pseudo-random. That means you can have just numbers that are difficult to predict. However, they are actually mathematically calculated. It's just the system makes it difficult to actually follow the next number. And there is one thing that computer does for this randomness that it doesn't exist really in nature, is that you can repeat the random string. That means you can start just a string of numbers, and you can restart it, and it will give you the same string of numbers. It's a very, very long string of numbers, and it's, again, difficult to predict what will be the next number. But I use this for making the creature. So a few letters of alphabet is not enough to make a creature. I have to decide the muscle power, number of legs, how the legs are actually sculpted. It's all sculpted through functions. So what one letter does is to call the seed of the string that is going to be generated. That means the A, it is the ASCII 65, it's a number, and is given to the seed of the random string, which will be a very long string. And from this string, I'm actually taking this parameter of the string to sculpt this creature. And the next letter will do the same, again, sculpting again the out of these random numbers, but it's also intertwined. That means the first letter dictates how the next string will be read and how long it will take. And therefore, by doing this, the combinations of letters influences the way they look at the end. Okay, so it's, for me, not predictable because it's too many informations. And even though I designed the system, I cannot tell you that AAA will do this and AAAB will do that. So but it's logically made. So therefore, it's repeatable. You put the same letters in the same order, you get exactly the same thing. You put 20 letters, and you will get something else. And out of this very large number of possibilities, every creature will have a certain body with some legs. And sometimes they are dysfunctional, sometimes they are functional. It depends how they are built. And then they are put to the test. They are in the environment, and they have to try to do something. So I try also to minimize the way I'm influencing them to do things. Since they are built symmetrically, that's very important to move. If you are asymmetrical, that's very difficult to move if you don't have a very sophisticated brain. We can do this, but simple creatures can't. Movement is very important. And so therefore, to locate either another creature or the food, they have to navigate by just knowing the distance between themselves and the target. So that's the only one information I'm giving them. And by it's called successive approximation. They will try out to move with their body. And if they see that the direction is getting higher, that means they are going away from the target, they will try to do the opposite movement. And by doing this, they actually follow a path and find a target. They don't succeed, all of them, but they tend to do. So very little amount of information again, the minimum as possible, because if you give too much information, and you will agree about that, you stop the evolutionary system to a certain level. So the more you predict or you try to conduct things, the less random you put into the system and less open it becomes. So of course you cannot really start at the atomic level, so you have to start with a certain level and with a design. Especially in an installation, you cannot ask people to interact for an hour to get something. So it really has to be efficient. But you see that it's not the fitness function is really working in the page. It's just happening at this moment. They're competing with each other for food, and the fact that the way they behave is just dictated by the way they are built, and it's not predetermined. So it's not in the genetic code at the beginning. It's the recombinations of this code with the generation that improve eventually the design. Okay, so this is not pre-calculated, and nothing is actually pre-calculated in this. The only thing that is calculated is the environment. The environment stays the same. It's the page. They move. They are calculated with a bit of physics to have some friction, move the muscles. All this remains the same for all of them. I hope I explained it already.
Thank you.
Thank you to both. My question about your aesthetics, the aesthetics of your artwork, because when I entered in the space, I knew that some artworks are from '94, so the consequences of the limit and the possibilities of aesthetics of digital coding, and then I shifted to new artworks, and there is no. You kept going to follow a similar aesthetic codes in your artwork during years. So you didn't shift it to a flat aesthetics or new aesthetic codes of some new artworks in digital environment. So I would like to hear you if it was intentional or if you had this reflection about aesthetics, because the visuality of your artwork today and '94, there's a red line which is following. So I'm wondering how was your debates and the possibilities opening with the new technologies?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, I think in the 90s, since it was so hard to make anything like interesting on the computer, maybe our work was more colorful. Like Evolve is rather colorful with this blue background and the colorful creatures, while maybe the works we do now with the flies is more like black and white. So in a way, of course, it was a decision. We could have also made it very colorful. But so it was more abstract and maybe a little bit more conceptual, the newer works. On the other hand, we don't really want to limit ourselves of not making anything more like in green or colorful or going back to maybe more plant interfaces. So it's more specific to each artwork rather than thinking, like, oh, how should we make our aesthetic? It's more like that it appears according to the concept of the artwork, or if it fits the artwork. But recently, for example, we don't show it here, but we did a new work called Apis Romane, which is extremely colorful with lots of plants and very, happy colors. We just had the feeling, okay, we want to go like really for almost kitschy colors. So this also happens, and we don't have like a predefined concept of how we want to do it. It's more according to the situation and maybe also the feeling that you have. And yeah, it's of course when you show works from the 90s, of course you see maybe, or the experts see that this is more an aesthetic from the 90s, but we didn't want to fake it and make it now look 2022. We really wanted to keep it as it was. And also thanks to the CKM in Karlsruhe, we were able to reconstruct the piece as it was, the Evolve, and we really tried to keep the colors and the code and everything as it used to be, to stay authentic, to show it as it always has been.
Somebody now would like to ask, do you have questions? Because we have to finish soon, because there is a continued program today. So just if you have one more question. No? Okay. Okay, thank you very much to participate in this laser talk. It was really extraordinary to have you all here, and I hope that we will see you soon again. And thank you very much for you coming and follow us, and thank you very much, Imal, just bringing this fantastic exhibition to Belgium and to make us possibility to do laser talk here. So thank you very much, and you're welcome for the next one. And now our program is continue.
We're going to have a 10-minute break, and afterwards we will have a tribute screening for Karin Lorenz-Lager, who is the curator of the exhibition, and the person that actually had the initiative to have this retrospective made through and tour, and will continue touring after IMAL. So this is a real living system. Though we want to tribute her, we will have a screening where we will see some of the things that the role that she actually played in supporting media art, and we will also have special screening for Peter Bible. We also have Philip Ziegler here with us, who will say also a few words to introduce the screening for Peter Bible. So I encourage you to stay, and in 10 minutes we'll be back. Thank you so much.